Welcome to The Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. The name of this podcast, The Rational Egoist, is derived from the philosopher Ayn Rand in her ethical system of egoism or self-interest. Now, Ayn Rand's philosophy is called Objectivism. So I don't call myself an objectivist. The reason I don't call myself an objectivist is because while I do consider myself to be a disciple of Ayn Rand and I'm very knowledgeable of her philosophy, I don't agree with every aspect of her philosophy. And there seems to be, let's call them gatekeepers to the philosophy, people who think that they can decide who is and who isn't an objectivist. So rather than argue with them, I just refrain from calling myself that. So there's a debate right now within the objectivist movement, and there's these gatekeepers who are, I guess you'd call them orthodox. But as we'll see, they're not as orthodox as you might think. So the debate is between those who consider objectivism to be a closed system and those who believe it to be an open system. On the closed side, they say that objectivism is the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Therefore, when Ayn Rand died, the philosophy was closed. Nothing can be added to it. Now, that's not to say that nothing more can be learned or nothing can be derived from it, only that it wouldn't be objectivism because it's not worded or rather not put out there by Ayn Rand. Open objectivists, on the other hand, believe that the philosophy can evolve. It can change. Personally, I'm on the closed side. I say that the philosophy of objectivism is Ayn Rand's creation, and if she's not adding to it, nobody else has the right to. Now, it gets a little bit complicated. So Ayn Rand had an intellectual heir, she called him, and that is Leonard Peikoff. And it seems to me that there's a conflation between Ayn Rand's views and Leonard Peikoff's views. Now, if objectivism is a closed system, this shouldn't matter, right? Leonard Peikoff can come and he can say anything that he wants. It wouldn't make any difference. It wouldn't be a part of objectivism unless it came from Ayn Rand. Now, recently, what got me thinking about this is I had a debate over something I didn't even realize was an issue. I posted in an Ayn Rand chat room that self-ownership is, basically I said, if we don't own ourselves, then we can't own anything. An objectivist responded and said that self-ownership is a nonsensical concept, and he gave his reasons. I'm not here to debate whether self-ownership is a valid concept or not right now. I just want to get into this idea of objectivism being a closed system and those who call themselves closed objectivists. So what I did was I looked up Ayn Rand on self-ownership, right? So this is what I came up with. First of all, this is Leonard Peikoff on the topic. He says, ownership is a concept that implies a relationship between you and an external object. There is the owner and there is the object possessed. How can you own yourself? Who is the owner? Who is doing the owning of the owner? Okay. And he then explained that self-ownership is a concept for frightened conservatives. But here's the problem now. That's what Peikoff says, right? Now consider this. In her magnum opus, Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand, in the person of Francisco d'Anconia, who in his famous money speech, says this: money rests on the axiom that every man is the owner of his mind and his effort. That's from John Galt's speech in Atlas. No, I'm sorry. That is from Francisco d'Anconia's speech in Atlas Shrugged. Okay. Now, Ellis Wyatt, another character, another Ayn Rand hero, says, what greater wealth is there than to own your life and spend it on growing? Pretty clear there, right? You own your life. Now here's John Galt. This actually is John Galt. Sorry for my mistake from before. John Galt says, and this is the main protagonist in the novel, he says, For centuries, the battle of morality was fought between those who claim that your life belongs to God and those who claim that it belongs to your neighbors, between those who preach that the good is self-sacrifice for the sake of ghosts in heaven and those who preach that good is self-sacrifice for the sake of incompetence on earth. And no one came to say that your life belongs to you and that the good is to live it. Okay? Now, Howard Rourke, the hero in The Fountainhead. He says, the ability to say yes or no is the essence of all ownership. It's of your own ego, your soul, if you wish. So you have 4 Randian characters saying or implying self-ownership. Then you have Leonard Peikoff saying, no, you don't own yourself. Also, it should be noted that in his lecture series, The Basic Principles of Objectivism, which were given under the auspices of Ayn Rand, they were sanctioned by Ayn Rand. Nathaniel Branden refers to self-ownership. So you have 4 characters, Ayn Rand heroes referencing self-ownership. You have Nathaniel Branden under Rand's auspices referencing self-ownership. And you have Leonard Peikoff saying, it's a non-concept. It doesn't make any sense, whatever. Now you have the guy that I had the debate with, right? And he brought up the same points that Peikoff brought up. So I decided to ask somebody else, somebody who's in the movement, a closed objectivist, an adamant closed objectivist, mind you, somebody who really seems to believe that he can decide who's an objectivist or not. You know what? Hell with it. His name is Tom Lottie. I'll put it right out there, just so there's no confusion. So I asked him about it. He went on to argue with me, and he told me that if I go around telling people that Ayn Rand believed in self-ownership, that we were done. Okay, that's cool. I cited the 4 characters. I cited Nathaniel Branden. To the 4 characters, he said, those are works of fiction. I said, okay, but Rand put her philosophy out there in fiction. He said, yes, but those were for undergraduates. No, sorry. He said those were for the layman. They weren't for, college students or intellectuals. They were just for the general public. Really? Because for the new intellectual, when John Galt's speech is introduced, it says, this is objectivism. So which is it? Personally, by the way, when it came to Nathaniel Branden, he said, well, that was put out by the Atlas Society. Well, the Atlas Society didn't even exist at the time that Nathaniel Branden gave those lectures. So now back to the beginning, right? Closed objectivism. Anything that comes after Ayn Rand is not objectivism. But evidently it is, because Ayn Rand believed in self-ownership, but the new guys don't. And it's the new guys are holding sway, and it's the new guys who seem to think that they're the gatekeepers. Okay, call yourselves objectivist all you want. I really don't, whatever. I'm not going to say I don't care, because I do. Obviously, I'm having this podcast. I'm discussing the issue now, but it seems a bit ridiculous to me, especially because it causes rifts amongst people who could agree on a number of issues, especially politically. Now, as somebody who's devoted to advocating for a free society, to achieving a free society, I don't care if people are going to support the same policies as me. I don't care their reasons. I don't care if they agree with me on every philosophical point. It doesn't matter. But these hardliners, these guys who don't even stick to their own principles, that's the key. They don't stick to their own principles. So why are they the gatekeepers exactly? I don't know. I'm going to say they're not the gatekeepers. And I'm going to say if somebody wants to call themselves an objectivist, go ahead. What difference does it really make anyway? You're not going to be struck with lightning, for God's sake. Myself, I still won't call myself an objectivist, because I think I disagree with Rand enough to where maybe I wouldn't fit the definition. But when it comes to fundamentals, I'm with her. So here's the fundamentals. Ayn Rand built her system up from what she called axiomatic concepts. existence, identity, and consciousness. She said these three concepts were axiomatic. They're self-evident in that any thought you think and any word you ever utter implies these three, and they absolutely do. The very fact that I'm having this conversation means that I exist. It means that I have identity because I'm me, and it means that I'm conscious, or I couldn't be having the discussion. She also taught that reason is our means of survival. It's our only means of gaining knowledge. I agree with that 100%. Emotions don't tell us anything. They really don't. Well, I shouldn't say that. The only thing that emotions tell us is that we feel a certain way about something, which means that we passed a judgment on that thing previously. So emotions will tell us about our value judgments, but it won't tell us that those value judgments are correct. Then Rand taught that life is the standard of value. I agree with that 100%. Life is the standard of value. Why? Because without life, you can't have value. There's the only thing that gives rise to the concept of value, of good or bad, is life, because it's only life that, first of all, that can pursue values, because inanimate objects can't, and it's only life that things can make a difference to, right? I also agree with Rand that human life is the standard of moral value. Why? Because morals imply choice. Freedom of choice that I don't believe, and I don't think there's any evidence out there for, that lower animals have. So they just pursue their values naturally, whereas human beings, we have to choose to go after our values. We have to discover them and choose to pursue them. And morality, or ethics, is a code of values to guide our behavior. So I agree with Rand on all of that. I also agree with Rand that the initiation of force is wrong, that it's wrong to use force against other people. That's another principle of hers. I also agree with her that individuals have the right to life, liberty, and whatever property they can justly accumulate. I also agree with her that capitalism is the only system that recognizes individual rights. So that's an awful lot of agreement that I have with her, right? So what do I disagree with her about? Well, Rand's definition of value is that which you seek to gain and or keep, right? My problem here is that Rand's is a theory of objective value, things that actually have value. But if a value is anything I seek to gain or keep, then even if the thing I'm pursuing is harmful, you would call it a value, which I wouldn't call it a value. Now, I think that her theory is actually spot on. I just think she used a poor definition. The dictionary definition is actually any object or quality desirable as a means or end in itself. Desirable means worth pursuing. It's good. And life is what gives rise to that concept of good. So it's just a squabble over a definition. One definition, I think, I don't know. I don't know where she got her definition, anything you seek to gain or keep. There's certainly, the problem might be that there's different ways in which the term value can be employed. There's what I value and what I should value. What I happen to value is anything I think is important. I was a drug addict. I valued drugs. That doesn't mean those drugs had value. It just means I valued them. I made a mistake in my evaluation. So I disagree with Rand about that and a few other ancillary things. But ultimately, fundamentally, I'm on her side. And there's a lot of other people that are on her side as well. But by excluding everybody that happens to disagree about this or that minute point, or even if it's a major point, if ultimately when push comes to shove, they're going to vote for the same types of politicians, they're going to advocate for the same types of policies, what difference does it really make? I want to see a free market capital system implemented. I want to see individual rights protected. I want to see the only purpose of government implemented, which is to defend the individual rights of the citizenry. The only thing outlawed would be the initiation of force. So if people want to enter into contracts and pay less than what someone else thinks is acceptable, that's fine with me. If companies want to discriminate, their private companies discriminate. I don't think they'd stay in business long, but it's their company. Right? If somebody wants to do drugs, it's your life. Do what you want with it. And if I agree with somebody on these policies, why wouldn't I side with them and try to get people elected who would implement them? Which is why now I recently became the spokesperson for the Libertarian Party of Connecticut. Ayn Rand didn't like libertarians. But I personally believe, and I wasn't there, I don't know, that a lot of that had to do with her personal squabbles with the then existing libertarians, not with the free market advocates per se. Now, she did have some legitimate gripes with libertarian philosophy. I'm not going to say she didn't. But ultimately, they desired to implement the same types of policies that she wanted to, that I want to, and that hopefully you want to. So instead of arguing over tiny things, let's actually implement a free society. Thank you very much. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. I hope to see you next time.